Discuss today's developments a little further now. Joining us here on Newsnight is Kayum Ahmed, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission. Good evening to you and welcome. Patently, justice has not been served.
Well, on the one hand, we are obliged to accept the court's findings. On the other hand, we are deeply, deeply disappointed by the fact that the state appears to have been unable to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these 7 police officers were involved in the Tatani murder. What's equally concerning is the fact that we have 720 other cases of police brutality reported during the 2011-2012 financial year to the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. And one can only ask and imagine how many of those cases are being properly prosecuted by the state. So this is deeply concerning for us as the Human Rights Commission.
Let's look at the IPID if we can. There were allegations of witness coercion. That in itself is very worrying, isn't it?
That is deeply concerning, and of course the applicability to other matters, to other cases which are also as high profile as this is certainly something that we're concerned about. We were informed, and the information we have at the moment is that some of the witnesses were unable to identify the police officers because they were wearing helmets. But at the same time, one can only imagine other situations, other cases of criminals wearing balaclavas or helmets who have still been prosecuted quite effectively. So I find this argument a little difficult. Of course, we need to look at and evaluate the court's judgment and then make a determination as to how to proceed.
Aside from the IPID, where else, in your opinion, then, in this particular case, did the state get it wrong?
Well, the Human Rights Commission found last year, towards the end of last year, that the Minister of Police and the National Police Commissioner had actually violated the rights of Andries Tatani in the sense that his rights to life, to dignity, and to peaceful protest had certainly been violated. And so this is something we maintain as the Human Rights Commission. On the other hand, we also should not lose sight of the fact that Tatani was involved in a protest because of a lack of water and services. And the police, of course, came into the situation in that very, very difficult context. So we should not also lose sight of the fact that the police were there because of service delivery challenges. And so there's also some level of responsibility by the municipality and the provincial government to ensure that those services are provided and to then reduce the number of protests which are ultimately having to be policed in this particular fashion.
Again, it's another nail in the police credibility coffin, isn't it?
It seems that way with the recent case involving Mido Machia being dragged behind the police vehicle. We've had other cases involving a young man in Cape Town where again the police were found guilty of human rights violation. It's certainly something which appears to be a systemic challenge, and a leadership deficit is clearly at play in this particular case.
Prominent on Twitter tonight is the NPA saying that renewed efforts must be made to find the killer. We need a new probe, says the tweet. That's a bit rich, isn't it?
It sounds like it, because it's quite evident that they've found the individuals responsible. So to argue that a new approach is required may be a bit rich indeed. And I think that the state really needs to go back to ensure that they look at this matter properly so that justice is in fact delivered in this particular case.
The fact that there are allegations of witness coercion as far as the IPID is concerned, how can that particular allegation be probed or investigated further?
I think the IPID clearly needs to play a role there. Given their mandate and responsibility, which certainly falls outside of our mandate as the Human Rights Commission, I think IPID is probably best placed to investigate and look into that matter. And I think,
but effectively, it would be investigating itself.
To some extent, yes, of course. And then there's the NPA, of course, who plays a role as well. So there are some challenges in that regard, but I suspect that they would be best placed to deal with that particular issue.
Do you think the family has any further recourse? They're the real victims here, aren't they?
There's the potential of going the civil claims route, which I'm sure that the Tatani family will be pursuing. Based on our discussions with them, this is certainly something they've intimated towards. And the police have, in certain instances, been found guilty and paid certain amounts of money to families and victims of families. So certainly this would be something they could pursue. On the other hand, they may also want the state to appeal this particular decision so that they are able to review the facts and the case in this instance.
Just finally, this also raises questions about the slow process and the log jams within the justice system itself, given that this is 2 years on and there were innumerable delays in this particular case. There wasn't the sense of urgency that perhaps was needed here.
Sure. I mean, the justice delayed issue is certainly something which we find throughout our court system. We know that our courts are clogged by many matters such as this, including criminal matters, and it's certainly a factor that needs to be considered as well.
Thank you for the insight. The Chief Executive Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission, Kayum Ahmed, with us here on Newsnight.